Jeff Adelman. And the reason I started this show is that I do get a lot of calls from potential clients in other areas of the law that I don't handle. So I get on the phone and I call my colleagues, my friends, and I ask questions about these areas that are common questions that people have. And I thought, probably be a good idea to get these on the air and take some of that sticker shock away and take away some of that fear of talking to a personal injury lawyer for the first time. So without further ado, today is a very special guest, Mr. Matthew Konecky, who's one of my closest friends and is a criminal defense attorney. Thanks so much for being here, Matt.
Thank you for that introduction.
And I'm really thankful. I think everybody can hear us now. So that's a big plus, because we have a lot to say. Whether that matters or not, that's another story. But in any event, Matt, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Because it's very interesting. You ain't from around here.
No, I'm not. So like you, I'm originally from Illinois, and I actually came down here to go to law school. I went to Indiana University for business school, and then came down to go to Nova Southeastern for law school. And the intent is that I was going to go to school at Nova and then go back to Illinois and practice with my father, who was an attorney for 40 years in Illinois. He was city attorney of Rock Island. But really, it happened as, when I got into law school, I realized I really enjoyed being in South Florida. And I actually had a couple internships with a criminal defense firm in Miami, and that got me interested in criminal law. And it was very interesting, and I decided to stay down here. Eventually met my wife, and the rest is history. But it was nice. What I liked about Florida is I got to meet you the first week. In fact, it was actually before we even started law school. We were in the Nova bookstore looking for our law books, like a couple of helpless sheep.
Books? What are those?
Yeah. those are the things with pages that kids don't read anymore.
Okay. I haven't seen any of those in a little while. And I kid. As lawyers, we see books all the time, even with the digital age being what it is. Well, again, you do an area of law that I don't handle, criminal defense. And while, Matt, I think the world of you, we talk all the time. At the end of the day, people are calling you because they're having trouble with the law.
That's right.
And as a wrestling fan, I had to bring out my autographed picture of the Big Boss Man. Rest in peace, Big Boss Man.
Well, that's the one thing that you don't want, is the Big Boss Man coming after you. You don't want to serve hard time.
No.
That's why people call me.
That's right.
So, yeah. So it basically, I provide a service for people who have entanglements with the Big Boss Man, or any other law enforcement for that matter. And, I think a stigma that a lot of criminal defense attorneys have is that we represent guilty people, or we shouldn't represent guilty people because if we know they did something, then how could we represent them?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And one of the things that I actually love about what I do is this type of law goes directly to the Constitution. We, on a daily basis, I deal with the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments, sometimes the First Amendment, sometimes the Equal Protection Clause. So it's a necessary. The criminal defense attorney is a necessary element to due process and to our own Constitution. So, at the end of the day, it is something that is important to me. But, it should be important to a lot of people, because one of the things that I found is that people that I serve might be only arrested once in their life, and it's one-time mistake. And that's their opportunity to take a one-time mistake and change their life around so that it never happens again. And that's my favorite type of client, is someone who can take a bad situation and turn it around and move away from it and give themselves a second opportunity. Whereas, if they don't have a lawyer and they show up to court, they might get, what they think is a decent plea or a resolution to their case that could follow them for the rest of their life.
And you brought up a really good point, Matt. I mean, we do have the Constitution, and sometimes people are like, oh, let's just throw them in jail and never let them out. Well, I mean, we've seen in the media in recent times what prosecution by media looks like. And if we had that, I think there have been situations where the wrong result would have happened. Not saying that it is always right in our system of law, but more likely the mistakes can happen based on just popular opinion and not actually the facts.
Absolutely. And that's obviously one of the problems that we have as criminal defense attorneys when you have a celebrity getting arrested and getting a slap on the wrist. It's not always what it seems. So, one of the things that I've done as a part of my practice is I make it a point to educate my clients and potential clients what really happens in a criminal defense case. And so one of the things I did in 2016, I actually wrote a book. It's called My Loved One's Been Arrested. What's Next? I think you have a copy, Jeff.
I have a copy. And before you leave here today, I was hoping maybe you could write to Jeff right at the top. I like getting autographed books.
That would be $20,
So,
Jeff.
Are you Virgil?
I'll get you next time.
In any event, how can viewers get a copy of this book?
Well, you can go to my website, 561law.com, and there's I have a few different resources there. Not only this book, we have a few others I'll probably get to talk to you about in a little bit. But you can go to my website. You can download it. You can also you can send me an email at matthew@matthewkoneckypa.com, and that's a mouthful. So it might be easier just to go to 561law.com. But if you can find me, find my website, you can download it.
Take some of that sticker shot
Oops,
away,
sorry about that.
take away
Little feedback.
So it is pretty accessible. If you can get my email, send me an email. I'll send you a complimentary book. I'll send you a few other things that I have for clients and those interested in what I do.
All right. Well, it's not a very thick book. Can you tell us a brief summary about
Sure.
what compelled you to write that and what kind of information people can find in there?
Yeah. So it basically what we would talk about in the book is kind of soup to nuts, what happens on your first offense, what to expect from, if your loved one gets arrested, you get the call that your child's in jail, your wife's in jail, husband, whatever, that, what you can go ahead and do. One, from getting a bondsman, how to hire a bondsman, how to hire an attorney, because ideally I can't be everywhere. And if someone, is in, the northern part of Florida, they can say, oh, this is how Matt would do it. So hiring an attorney, what happens? So, the biggest misconception that I have is that clients have when they first come see me, especially for, a fairly minor offense, is your first date is called an arraignment date. Most people think that that's your trial date and they want to hire you. And then they think in 30 days, you're going to go to trial. And that's simply not the case. Most cases are going to go anywhere from 3 to 6 months, if they're properly worked up right. So what I do is kind of educate you, these are the types of hearings you might anticipate, because you're going to hear as a defendant, you're going to hear a lot of words for the first time you've never heard of before. And a lot of attorneys don't like to explain things because some people feel it's better to keep a client in the dark, makes them look better when they get a successful outcome. I'm just the opposite. I like to put the light on everything so that they can anticipate what's happening next.
So even if somebody doesn't hire you, they could find that book helpful.
Absolutely.
As a resource.
Absolutely. Anybody in the state of Florida, and typically anybody who would get this, and laws change from state to state, but the concepts are all the same.
Wait, we have a question here. Let me see. First time, how quickly should a person contact a criminal attorney, Matt? That's from Frank Hara.
Well, that's a good question, Frank. And so ideally, one thing I tell people is you never have to rush into anything, but you also don't want to wait to the last moment. So that's kind of a vague answer, and I get that. But what I say is do your own due diligence. The sooner the attorney has a chance to work on your case, the better. And let me give you an example. With let's say a misdemeanor, in most cases, after an arrest, you have 30 days before your next court date. During that time, just because you've been arrested doesn't mean that you're going to get convicted or that you're even going to get charges filed against you. So just because you're arrested doesn't mean the state will actually bring the charges that the police arrested you for. I like in that first 30 days, if there's a real issue as to what happened with the arrest, I like to bring it to the attention of the filing attorney at the state attorney's office to say, hey, this is a case that you shouldn't file. And a lot of times that we can be successful and get them to either change the charge, amend the charge, or even note what they call no filing the charges. Client doesn't even step foot in court and the case is done. So ideally, you want to do it as fast as you can. But the flip side to that is when someone gets arrested, a lot of people get mailers from attorneys saying, hey, hire me, hire me, hire me. And people panic like, oh my gosh, I got to have someone today. And the first person they talk to on the phone is the person that they hire. That's not always a good thing. And in my book, I explain, what to look for. Talk to a few different people. Get a good rapport with somebody because, you're going to have to work with them. And, your life is in that person's hands. And if you don't get along with them or you don't understand certain things and they're not explaining it to you, you don't want to have buyer's remorse and going with a criminal defense attorney.
So, I mean, you get a lot of mailers. People put ridiculously low offers for representation on there. I guess what you're saying is you get what you pay for.
Absolutely. And that's I think it's interesting that someone would send out a mass mailer to somebody for instance, a DUI case and have a certain charge on there without looking at what the facts are of the case, because some cases could be really easy and get done quick, and some cases could be more complex. You just want to make sure someone's done their job and reviewed the case and understand what's going on. So, a flat fee on a DUI that someone wants to charge $750 for, I think is absolutely ridiculous, because that means they're going to walk you in, they're going to plead you out, and they're not going to take the time to work the case up.
And there might be an opportunity to completely get rid of the charges, and you don't know.
Yes, absolutely.
You don't know unless you actually do your due diligence and have somebody review your case.
Sure.
Well, we're talking a little bit about DUI, and that brings up the next book that I'm going to have you autograph. What you must know about your DUI case before you do anything. So if anybody wants information, wants this packet, they can download it on 561 Law.
Yeah, 561law.com.
Okay. And again, I think this goes to your philosophy, which is similar to mine. I like to educate people.
Yeah, absolutely. So with this DUI report, one of the things that I think is important that, people don't understand is there's kind of two aspects for every DUI case. There's an administrative aspect. That means your license, your ability to drive, that gets affected, as well as you having a criminal case. And I think that the number one thing I want to focus on that in that book is the fact that understanding that your license can get suspended twice for the same DUI. If you blow over the legal limit or you refuse a breath test, the DMV will suspend your license. Now, if you get convicted of DUI, the court will suspend your license. So essentially, your license can be suspended twice for the same DUI. There's certain ways to handle that, ahead of time and be upfront. Now, this is one of the situations where hiring a DUI attorney very soon after your arrest is helpful, because you have 10 days from the date that you get arrested or have a license suspension for a DUI to request an administrative review hearing, or if you want to request a hardship. So that's something that I can do right away is kind of educate somebody, hey, this is the route I would go. This is what we can do to get your license back. But if you wait to the last moment, it could be too late.
Well, I think probably the best way to avoid the DUI is to use your La Croix holder.
Yes.
Like this, which I'm very thirsty. So these are available
Cheers.
as well. Cheers.
Contact me, MatthewKoneckyPA.com, 561law.com.
I'm sorry, I can't help cheesing it up with Matt. This is how we are all the time.
Well, you can do that. I'm going to go ahead and just drink from my cup here. Are you jealous?
You brought your own cup.
I do.
I was going to say.
I was awarded this cup.
Yeah, you were. It was a major award.
Major award.
I was going to ask you to deal with the elephant in the room, but now I feel like there's a a pack of elephants and a herd of elephants in the room. You come in and you assert yourself as the number one lawyer, and then I'm looking at you and you're RoboCop.
Yeah.
So tell everybody what happened to you.
So let me see how we can get this on here. And for those who can't see, and for my clients watching, let's see. I have a bright, shiny new mechanical arm that I've been dealing with for the last month now. So I just underwent shoulder surgery due to an injury in jiu-jitsu.
Which all my lawyer friends do. So naturally, you know, that would happen. But that's been a big part of your life. Jiu-jitsu, you wrestled in college, wrestled in high school, very active person. Dealing with the type of matters you deal with on a daily basis, is that one of the ways that you kind of relieve stress?
Yeah, it's definitely at the end of the day, from a hard day of work or, court, and, just being able to get on the mat and kind of focus on that, because when you're in the midst of that and doing any kind of martial art or, you have to be aware of your surroundings and you have to be focused on what you're doing. And in a sense, like people who meditate, you focus in on yourself, and that's, it's a really good stress reliever. And, other than the injury, it's been, a big part of my life for a while.
Well, so, and we've talked about it, and I certainly hope you're back at it soon. Tell us, there was another question on your, here in Miami, there is a large immigrant community. Should a person going through the immigration process need to retain counsel for DUI?
Yes, absolutely. And that's, nowadays, more than ever, with the current administration, if somebody is not here legally, having an attorney defend their rights there's no other option. You have to have it, because the arrest alone could subject them to deportation. Certainly, if you take a plea, when anybody takes a plea to a guilty charge, there is each judge is required to let the person know, if you are not United States citizen, this plea will subject you to deportation. So it is absolutely essential that you need to have representation, for any criminal matter, not just DUI, but any criminal matter. And even something simple like driving without a license, which, I mean, for the most part, people handle themselves all the time. But something as simple as that, we've seen people get deported for, and it's really a shame.
Well, again, I think that was a really good question. And being in South Florida and, hearing the different stories in the news, that's something that I'm sure that you're seeing a lot more frequently.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Matt, we've talked a lot about DUI. We've talked about some other matters. What other type of criminal offenses do you represent people for?
Well, the old joke is anything from traffic to trafficking. So I handle pretty much.
Actually, I haven't heard that before. That's pretty good.
I handle pretty much anything. I don't do capital cases. That's like a first-degree murder case, anybody that's subject to death penalty cases. I typically don't do anything that involves, child sex cases. It's just that there's a niche market for people who do that, and they do that on a regular basis.
And even as a criminal defense attorney, you can select what type of offenses you are going to represent people for.
Sure.
And that's very common within the criminal defense attorney community.
Absolutely. So, but I think a big portion of my practice is DUI, possession cases, and I do a fair amount of domestic violence cases. And again, we've wrote a book. It's called One Bad Night: What to Do If Your Loved One's Been Arrested For.
I'll hold it up.
I've only got one arm. Remember?
Yeah, I forgot. Now everybody understands why I'm, doing double. This is a one-man band show, and it's really, I can't even get the help. This is another one that we have, and it says 6 things you need to know plus. Why would somebody need a attorney if they're arrested for domestic violence, especially? you know, these things happen, and then the victim a lot of times will decide to recant. Why would a person still need to have an attorney in that situation?
Well, the situation you just explained when a victim recants, that's even more of a need for someone to have representation. Uh, I find a lot of times I'm hired by the victim. They will come to my office and acknowledge that the situation got out of control. There's never been a problem in the past. Sometimes the victim's not even the one who called 911.
Mm-hmm.
Um, most police policies set, if there's a domestic call, someone's going to jail. Um, most it's not a law, but it's most policies that's what's going to happen. So one of the things that I can do for a victim who's dead set that recants is um, help them fill out the right paperwork to get to the state attorney. As we discussed before, you have 30 days, or so to get it before arraignment. So when an attorney is deciding whether or not to file a case, if they have an affidavit from the victim saying, I want to have contact with this person, I don't want to prosecute. It makes the state attorney's job easy by saying, hey, we don't want to waste our time with this one. We want to go for the one where the victim's really in trouble. The victim's has a problem. So it's having representation through that. And there's also collateral consequences. A lot of times when the even an arrest that turns out nothing happens, but it's done in front of the kids, DCF gets involved, and that that's a whole separate area that can get quite hairy and put the whole family in peril. And so my book not just doesn't look at the view from the defendant, but more from the victim as well. What the victim can do, because they may still want to press charges. They may want to get counseling for themselves or go to a victim shelter. So I've got some information on that as well. So this is kind of a broad sense of, in the whole domestic violence area, what to do.
Well, we're getting another question, Matt. This is something that we offer people if they want to ask questions live to guests, and I think this is a particularly good one. Can Matt speak a little about marijuana possession ticket versus an arrest?
Sure. So Miami-Dade County has allowed for the decriminalization of a marijuana possession charge, what used to be just a misdemeanor. Miami-Dade County has now made it a civil infraction, which is much like a speeding ticket. Broward, the Board of Commissioners approved that, but the Broward State Attorney's Office will not honor that.
Mhm.
So, and I don't know, not so many jurisdictions in Florida are really allowing for that. But basically, is that you just pay a fine and walk away. You don't end up with a criminal record, and that's it. Whereas if it's a misdemeanor charge, it's going to stay on your record unless you dismiss it or move to seal it.
It's interesting because there is an election coming up for the state attorney's office in Broward County, and I'm sure that that is going to be a big issue.
Certainly, and one would think that our jails are overpopulated with people with possession of multiple possession of marijuana charges. We spend a lot of time and money housing these people in jail, whereas now we've legalized medical marijuana, and we're kind of coming to a different realization about what's more harmful, marijuana or opiates. I think with some fresh blood in the state attorney's office, I'm hoping someone will come to their senses and say, hey, maybe we can try the civil citation. Now, one of the things, though, in Miami is if you kind of get a freebie, you get one, you might get a second one, but then after that, it can turn into a misdemeanor charge. So, there's ways of handling this so it doesn't interrupt somebody's life for the rest of their life,
And that's important, especially, giving somebody a second chance for something like that, where they're really, it's something they're doing to themselves. It's
Right.
not like they were harming somebody else.
Sure. And, the thing to keep in mind too, that doesn't excuse if someone's under the influence of marijuana and driving, and that's still a crime, so even if it's legal, and so you can still, even if if it's medical and you're prescribed it, and but you're under the influence of marijuana while driving, that's an actual crime, even despite the fact that it's a prescribed drug. So that's something I think one of the things in my book they talk about DUIs is understanding that you can get a DUI not only just for alcohol but for prescribed medicine and
Sure.
unprescribed medicine. So.
It's driving under the influence. It's not driving under, right. Driving drunk.
Right, exactly.
Another question, and again, it might be different in Dade as opposed to Broward. If someone gets a citation for marijuana, do they need a lawyer? First time offense?
I probably wouldn't, but it may be something to the effect that, if you are going to, if it's going to hurt your job in the future, then yes, you may want to consult an attorney about what your options are. I'm not going to say, you need one or you don't need one. I just say you consult an attorney, or if it matters to you. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that, that marijuana law is really in flux, and that's why I'm having our former classmate Mike Minardi on June 27th, who's kind of at the forefront of marijuana law and decriminalization. And I mean, there's a lot of money to be made by the state if they do decriminalize it. So it's going to be very interesting to see those developments.
Yeah.
Matt, got a few more questions I want to ask you. This has been a lot of fun for me, and I've learned a lot because, again, this is not my area, and I don't always get that deep into the questions at this point. But I do get asked questions about expungements.
Sure.
And I understand that you do those. If you could explain what they are and who would be a candidate for an expungement on their record.
Okay, so there's two types. There's a seal and an expunge, and basically a seal seals the state's file. No one can have access to it. Removes it from the state attorney's office, from the clerk of court, so that wouldn't be visible. So, and then there's an expungement, which takes that step one further, and this file's actually destroyed. You can't get it back, that type of thing. So it's eligible. So for first-time offenders, you get one in your life. You can't just keep committing crimes and getting them expunged. But if you have your case dismissed, you would be eligible for an expungement. If you have, in most situations, if your case is get a withhold adjudication, which is not a conviction, but you've taken a plea, maybe done some probation, in most situations, you're eligible to have your case sealed. You can go to my webpage and understand the difference between what crimes are eligible or not. But it takes anywhere from about 9 to 12 months to get either a seal or expungement done. And basically, when you go through that process, the court orders your case expunged, removes it from the clerk's office, removes it from FDLE. Now you go to apply. There's 4 circumstances where you're going to have to acknowledge your arrest or acknowledge your case. And that's if you work for DCF, if you're going into law school, if you're going to work for a government agency, something like that. So, there are things that you need to be aware of. And then the most common side effect of having your arrest that an expungement won't cover is that if your mugshot has been broadcast, so when you get arrested, there's some vultures out there that'll take your mugshot.
It's terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Yeah, and they'll put it on like busted.com, something like that. And then when your case is over, you want your mugshot removed. In the past, they have been charging $300-400 just to remove it. There's been a new law that was enacted last year that says that you have to give them a certain amount of notice, and there's a procedure on how to do that. And then they must remove your website picture from their website if your case has been sealed or expunged. But again, you can contact me and I'll give you more information on
That's, I'm glad you brought that up, because that just, again, I think you called it right. They're vultures. I mean, if somebody's record is clean enough that they can get an expungement, to have that hanging out there because somebody is basically holding their picture hostage online. And we all know about cyber crimes and everything else right now. It's a different world than it was when we first started 17 years ago.
It certainly is. But, at the forefront of it, and what I think they understand is when something happens in the state of Florida by a government entity, we're what we call a government under the sunshine, which means everything gets reported. So it was a public record. And at the end of the day, your arrest was a public record.
Right.
So,
but if you can get an expungement, that should be gone too.
Yeah,
so that's good that that's out there. Well, Matt, we're almost finished. I wanted to bring up to you, though, something that obviously is going to come up. How much does your representation cost? I don't have any money. What am I going to do? I need to hire a lawyer, but it's expensive to hire an attorney. You're talking about your liberty. You're talking about not going to jail. Tell us how you charge, what it costs, if you can give like a ballpark, and if any ideas if people have difficulty coming up with the money.
Sure. Well, if you think a lawyer is expensive, try going to court without one and going to jail or having a permanent record. That gets 10 times more costly. And I've got a breakdown of what a DUI conviction costs, in the long run with insurance and stuff like that. So, how I charge for most of my criminal cases is a flat fee. And that just depends on the charge. It depends on the amount of time that I anticipate, I'll be able to spend on the case, the complexity of it. And, I all of those come into factors, and I hate to give ballparks because, someone watching this said, oh, you said you charge X amount for this type of case. What I can tell people is I work with most people on a payment plan. We actually, we use Lending USA. They're a preferred lender. They actually have a 0% financing program where if you pay it off in 6 months, there's no interest on the loan. It's a great way for clients to, stretch out, cost of a criminal defense for 60 months. So, you have 5 years to pay that off. You can get down to, a couple $100 a month, and you have really good, solid representation. So that's one of the ways that I do it. If someone doesn't qualify for that, I'll talk about some in-house financing that we do. But, I think sometimes people are actually surprised that it's not as expensive as they thought. But it just all depends. I think so. That's one of the important things to do is have a conversation with an attorney about what the perceived cost would be. But that conversation should only come in after you've talked about the facts of the case, talked about that attorney's experience in the community. So if it's it's a Palm Beach case, your experience with Palm Beach County judges, or Broward County judges. So the topic of price should always come towards the end, so that if you're worried about price up front, you're probably going at it all wrong.
Yeah, it's sort of like if somebody comes in, I had a car accident, what's my case worth, without looking at the facts.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
I get that, and I kind of give a very similar answer. It depends.
Right.
The famous lawyer answer, but it's really true. Every case is different, and you try to give the best estimate you can, but you got to have the facts. Anybody who is going to give you a cost estimate without knowing the facts, probably, not somebody that is going to tell you the right thing at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So to conclude, again, Big Boss Man knocking on your door. How do people get in touch with you, Matt?
So you can go to my website, 561law.com.
And I posted it up there for everybody.
Perfect. You can contact me through the website. If you Google search me, Matthew Konecky, I'm going to pop up because there's no other Matthew Konecky that's practicing law in Palm Beach and Broward County. No. You can call me, through Google. You can go to avo.com and search me, and all my contact information's there. Search YouTube. I'm on all the basic fronts.
And you'll be on for this too.
And I'll be on here. So that's the best way to do it. Give us a call. When you call us, we're going to get a detailed intake from you, just so we can get a lot of the information. By the time I speak to the client, usually have the police report, got a little bit of background about what happened, and then I'm fully educated on what I can do, in our first even telephone conference.
Well, Matt, I appreciate you venturing down here from way off in Palm Beach Gardens, coming down to the Springs to hang out with me. it's really been a pleasure. For those of you watching or listening, our next show will be May 14th next week, and we'll have appellate lawyer Ron Renzi on with us talking about, if you don't like the results of your trial, there are options. So Mr. Renzi will be going through that. Should be a very entertaining, interesting program that people really don't understand the appellate process. Hopefully he'll shed some light on that for us too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we've had to use that a few times in my cases. So.
Yeah, unfortunately I have too. So.
Jeff, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk, and it's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Again, my name is Jeff Adelman, and I can be reached at 954-341-2777. My website is adelmanlawyers.com. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, or if there's any guests that you would like to see on this program, give me a shout. Have a great day, everybody.